I don't normally write scathing reviews. I talk about games because I love them, because something in them haunts me long after the credits roll. The Little Nightmares series was one of those. I adored the first two so much that when they ended, I went searching for anything that could give me that same atmosphere, that mix of quiet fear and helplessness against larger forces. I played Bramble, Guilt, even Out of Sight, chasing that same feeling. So when Little Nightmares 3 was announced, I was ecstatic. New story, new characters, a chance to fall into that world again. I love Little Nightmares 1 and 2 because of the way their stories were told. Not a single word was spoken, yet nothing was misunderstood. Everything you needed to know was whispered through the atmosphere. The world itself spoke to you. The small drops of unifying symbolism, the way the characters moved, the way monsters existed in their spaces, it all told a story without saying a thing. Each moment was a desperate adventure to escape an unending nightmare, to find freedom and safety, and yet that hope never came. You survived just long enough to become the very thing that had been chasing you all along. Or, in the DLC's case, you didn't even get that far. You simply became fodder for the next monster's path, in the most heartbreakingly inevitable way, and bringing a story full circle. Little Nightmares 1 and 2, while separate in setting and focus, were bound by the same nightmare. Each explored a different corner of the same decaying world, and together they built a larger picture, one that rewarded you for paying attention, for piecing together scraps of lore if you were looking. That's what made these games special. Even without words, they spoke to each other. So when Little Nightmares 3 was announced, I was ready for the next thread, the next whisper in the dark that would tie the nightmare together. But I and so many others were let down. I might get flack for saying this, but it's the Okamiden of this series. A game that feels like it inherited a structure and a skeleton from something brilliant, but then decided to color outside every single line. It's clear the new team had an outline, maybe even the original roadmap, but somewhere along the way they chose to make their own version of Little Nightmares instead of continuing the one we knew, and it shows. Not in a bold, we reinvented the series way, but in the small fractures where the tone, the pacing, and the storytelling no longer line up with what came before. Let me start with the positives, because I truly wanted this to work, and there are moments where I saw the spark that made Little Nightmares what it is. The co-op system was a great idea. Whether playing with a friend or letting the AI take over like in Little Nightmares 2, it brought a layer of connection the series hadn't before. There's something oddly comforting about not being alone for once in such a hostile world, even if that comfort was temporary. The two new characters are wonderful. Their designs feel right at home in the franchise's eerie handmade world. Their abilities, the way they help one another, and the tiny moments between them. All of it held so much promise. For a while, I thought this might be the emotional anchor the story would lean on. The opening desert area, beautiful. Lonely. It captures that signature Little Nightmares tension, that sense that the world itself is watching you. The sound design hums with dread, and for a brief time, I really believed I was back in that familiar nightmare. And the memory aura mechanic was one of the best ideas in the game. It's fascinating, mysterious, and clearly tied to something deeper in the lore. That ability alone could have been the emotional or narrative backbone of the story. For a moment, it felt like it would be a key item for something incredibly important. The art direction, the atmosphere, the music, the tone, all of it tried. You could tell someone, somewhere on the team, understood what made this world tick. And that's why what comes next hurts so much, because this could have been great. Unfortunately, this is where everything starts to crumble. The controls were the first red flag. There were moments where my partner or I would press jump, and instead of leaping, our characters would just walk straight off the edge into oblivion. It wasn't lag, it wasn't timing, it was just broken. And when a game relies on precision under pressure, that kind of inconsistency kills the tension instantly. Then came the glitches, and there were a lot. Entire chapters had to be restarted because when we jumped through mirrors, the camera would snap back to the beginning instead of following us through. Trapdoors wouldn't load, so we'd stand there thinking they were crawl spaces until an invisible door finally decided to exist. And then the ending. Instead of credits, I got a black screen with music. No closure, no reward, not even the achievement for finishing the game. At least, not until I reset the entire chapter and did it again. Oh, and the co-op collision system? Absolutely not. Being able to bump each other off cliffs or block ladders so one of us plummeted to our death might sound funny once, until it happens over and over. But the real nightmare wasn't the bugs, it was the pacing. I don't know why Little Nightmares 3 decided to turn half the experience into an endless string of chase scenes. It feels like every time you start to breathe, another one begins, and they leave no room for error. There's barely enough time to process what's happening before you're dead again. In the first 2 games, when you were caught, it was your fault. You panicked, you hesitated, but here it feels like the game itself doesn't want to give you a chance. It mistakes stress for fear. And the monsters, every single one of them, apparently inherited the ability of hearing from the janitor. But worse, you so much as stand up and they immediately laser lock onto your location, no matter how well you're hidden. There's no chance to recover, no panic to victory moment, just you moved, now you die. Even the world design feels off. 1 and 2 flowed together. Every area felt connected, every transition made sense. But 3, it's just jumping through random nightmares with no emotional thread tying them together. The mere transversal mechanic could have bridged those worlds, but instead it just made the disconnection more obvious. And the story never finds itself. I kept waiting for answers about the boy I lovingly call Crow, about his power, that perhaps it was a tie to the mirror monster, or about the north wind I had hoped we were being led to because of the desert area in the first. But nothing comes. The world sets up these fascinating ideas and then abandons them like forgotten dolls. Oh, maybe that's why that's there. The memory aura mechanic especially breaks my heart. It's brilliant. It's mysterious. It feels important. And yet, it's used for a minuscule amount of time and then completely forgotten. It could have been the emotional core of the entire story, a literal manifestation of the past clinging to you, but instead it's just wasted potential. And finally, the callbacks. Gnomes outside the maw. Droning TVs that don't belong to the Pale City. It feels like nostalgia for nostalgia's sake, as if they thought tossing familiar icons into random locations would make us feel something, but all it did was remind me how much better those moments used to be. Even the circus level, while unique, felt like a mashup of the bullies in Little Nightmares 2 and the grotesque residents of Little Nightmares 1, only this time they traded a feast for candy. It's strange, not scary, and worst of all, it feels hollow. In the end, what was once elegant horror became chaos, a nightmare not of fear, but of frustration. I don't make videos like this because I enjoy tearing things apart. I make them because I care about the worlds that shaped me, and Little Nightmares was one of those. And while Little Nightmares 3 didn't carry the torch, I haven't lost hope. Because the original team, the minds that gave us those first 2 beautiful, terrifying nightmares, are working on something new. It's called Reanimal. And if anyone can rekindle that eerie, melancholic magic, it's them. I look forward to whatever they create next, not because I expect another Little Nightmares, but because I believe they'll give us something that makes us feel the same way again. The quiet dread, the fragile hope, the beauty in the dark. And maybe, when it comes, it'll remind us why we fell in love with this nightmare in the first place.